Hi, I'm Glyn Dewis. I'm a portrait photographer from the UK, and in this video I want to show you a really cool technique that I call the invisible black background. Now it sounds really kind of crazy, but what is it? Well, basically this is a technique that you can use whether you're using a speed light or even a studio light, indoors or outdoors, and make it look as if you're taking a photo in a studio with a black background. It is so incredibly impressive when you do this in front of people, maybe at a wedding, because they think, how on earth have you done that? It's really simple to do, like most things in photography, but the results can be really dramatic. So how do we do this then? Well, it's really simple. All we're going to do first of all is forget our flash. We're going to use our camera's settings to create the black background, and we do that. We're going to forget high-speed sync. We'll talk about that in a minute. But first of all, we're going to think about the sync speed that our camera and our flash can ultimately talk to. Now that's the speed that when we press the shutter, as we press that shutter and the flash does go off, all of that light can go onto the sensor. So we need to think about that. And it varies from camera to camera. Now I'm going to be using my Sony here, so I'm going to be using around about 200th of a second. So that's the first thing we're going to do. We're going to set up the maximum sync speed, forgetting high speed sync and all that kind of magical stuff. We'll set it to the maximum sync speed, 200. The next thing is the ISO. We want to create a black background. We want to actually take a picture of nothing here, so we want to make the sensor as least sensitive to light as possible. So let's take it way down. Again, it varies on whatever camera you're using, but I'll take mine to 100 ISO. Now the final thing to think about there is the F number. Okay, now this is going to be coming about a bit of practice. Sometimes you'll be able to do this after a bit of practice and by just choosing an F number, take a quick shot and your settings will be perfect. But all we need to do in this particular instance here, we're in a room, we've got all the lights on, we could be outdoors. I'm going to choose something like F8. Now again, we're forgetting the flash at the minute. This is just the camera settings. So now when I take a picture of Robert, when I take that shot, I actually don't want to see Robert appear on my camera screen. I want to have seen just a black background. If it's not dark enough, if there's a little bit of things you can start to see in the distance there, the only thing we can change now is the f-stop. We can't take our ISO any lower. We don't want to exceed that sync speed of 200th of a second. The only thing we can do now is make the eye of the camera close down even more. So we're at f8, we can maybe see a few things. Let's go to f11. Take another shot. Is it completely black? Yes, it is. Right, so now you've done that, there's your camera settings. All we need to do now is bring in the light. So I'm going to bring in my light when we're doing this. I'll set it on a certain power. We'll take a shot. Can I see Robert? Well, I can see a little bit of him. I now need to manually then increase the power of that flash until I can see Robert, and I can paint the light in how I want it to. Now with this technique, you can use any lighting pattern, of course, but what I'm going to do is kind of get Robert to be side onto the camera and almost paint a bit of light so it creates a bit of an outline. I think that could be really, really cool. And you'll also notice what I'm going to do when we do this. I'm ideally thinking about the final picture where there'll be a bit of dead space. I'll do a tight shot, we'll do a full length or three-quarter shot, and Robert's looking across the frame. But I want to be dead space, so your eyes are drawn to where he's looking across. But I've spent a lot of money on my camera here. It's got some incredible technology in there. I want to make sure that the camera captures all the detail. That's Robert. I don't want my camera sensor to be photographing a black hole. So I'll make sure that I frame Robert completely within the actual area on the sensor there, but I'll allow just a little bit either side of him and on the top, so that later on in Photoshop, I can very easily extend that. But the main thing is all the money that I've spent on my camera and that sensor, that incredible sensor, is getting the detail from Robert. It's as simple as that. Now there are some things to consider with this. If you're doing it outdoors, generally you're not going to have a problem with it. But if you're doing this indoors, you might find if you're not in a room that's maybe as big as what we're in now, you might get light bouncing off the walls and you can't seem to get it completely black. That's when you have to really consider about the modifier you're using. Now, I'm using a large octa. That's absolutely fine in this room here. But if I'm in a smaller room, maybe somebody's front room or something like that, I might need to think of a smaller modifier. I may even have to think about putting a grid on it. I may even start to think about bringing in a flag just to prevent some of that light spilling onto that back wall. So that's something that you might have to certainly think about there. Now, one other thing about this, obviously at the start we mentioned about high speed sync. That's going to be a great way for us to darken down if we're doing this outside. We could overpower the sun if we can make our shutters go at like 8,000th of a second. The great thing about using that high speed sync is With this shot of Robert, I'm having to use the f-stop, going to f11. You know, first of all f8, then f11. He is completely in focus. But if you want to do this maybe where Robert will be looking straight at the camera, and it goes black behind him, and all you want in focus is his eyes, then you'd want to have a wider aperture. So you can kind of weigh off between the two there. You can open up the aperture, but increase the shutter speed using high speed sync to get exactly the same result. So that kind of shows how good it is to have this technology available to us to create completely different looks. So that's the invisible black background. Let me know if you certainly give that a go in the comments below. I think it's a great technique, especially if you're a wedding photographer, to pull that one out of the bag, because if you've got Uncle Bob following you around, taking every shot you're taking, he ain't gonna be able to do this. If you've got the flash, how on earth have you done that? And you'll soon find he'll disappear. But in the comments, let me know what you think. Do you like it where it's painted the light side on there? Or maybe you like the 3/4 shot? Let me know in the comments below, and it'd be great to see what your thoughts are.